of violent riots. Charlotte is bracing for a third night of protests, but hopefully the extra manpower will help keep things under control tonight. It all ignited after the fatal police shooting of a black man that police still maintain was armed with a gun. It was utter chaos in the streets of Charlotte last night. Fox News correspondent Steve Harrigan was in the middle of it all and did some amazing reporting.
We're seeing a real massive tear gas as well as reports of firing rubber bullets into the crowd. This is a lot more out of control than in Ferguson. This is a pitched battle between police and protesters that's gone back and forth for a long period of time. I'm seeing scenes here that the last time I've seen them were on the West Bank, the back and forth between Israelis and Palestinians with tear gas. That's what we're seeing here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
So Steve is back on the ground. He joins us now. Steve, thank you. So this video, it's all about this video, it feels to me, the video that allegedly will show whether or not Mr. Scott was armed or not, whether holding a gun or not. Now, the lawyers for the family came out and said they had not viewed the video. About an hour ago, they had not yet viewed the video. Has that, the fact that they came out and talked to the people of Charlotte, has that calmed the tone a bit?
I don't think things have calmed down at all. Up and down this street here where we saw that riot last night, we're seeing similar scenes of this. People really preparing for more possible violence. Hotels and merchants pulling out the glass, sometimes replacing what was shattered last night, or else putting in plywood or OSB board to try and protect it from more violence tonight. That's what's going on now. At the height of the violence last night, we saw about 800 people. And I've got to tell you, I think a lot of those people out there last night were not listening to lawyers and don't care whether the man who was killed by a police officer was holding a book or a gun. They are angry. They want revenge. They attacked the police last night. They said they're going to be back again tonight. So we're going to see whether that stronger police presence will slow things down tonight or not, Eric.
We're going to bring it around, but any news on when the family is going to actually see it and when they're going to let the public see it?
Yeah, the lawyers for the family said they were too traumatized to actually speak to the media today. There's been two real sources of information throughout this conflict, very different sources. On the one hand, you have the police and public officials giving one version of events. On the other hand, you have a whole range of people, including some protesters, going on social media, giving a very different version of events. So we've seen different things, like a young man was shot last night during the protests. Police saying it was civilian-on-civilian shooting, but the people who were running from that shot saying police fired the shots. So two very different narratives, depending on who you listen to, officials and police or social media. A lot more direct reporting, some of it reckless.
All right, Greg.
Yeah, Steve, we're wondering, you're seeing these protests in Charlotte, not so much in Tulsa. Why is that? Is it because it's easier perhaps to get to Charlotte for activists or protesters? I don't know.
It's a good question, because you think on the merits of the case and the reason to protest, the situation in Tulsa might lend itself more to the protesters. They might have more weight of truth on their side than in this case, where it looks like the man killed did have a gun, did have an arrest record. You had 3 officers present, and you do have officials saying he posed an imminent threat. Why it's happening here and not there is tough to say. And it's hard to predict what's going to happen. We saw it really ebb and flow last night. There's 10 people out on the street, then there's 800 people out on the street. One thing that not turned them back, though, last night was tear gas, and that's what we've seen since Ferguson. These protesters, the ones here last night, were organized and determined. Flashbang grenades, mace, rubber bullets did not turn them back. They kept regrouping. They wanted more. They wanted to fight the police, and they were out in force last night. Greg.
All right, KG.
Yeah, I just have a question in terms of the response. I mean, obviously there has to be an adequate measure of public safety concern here for the businesses, the people that are around in that area, to be able not to be held hostage in their homes, essentially because of the fear of violence and reprisal on the streets. What is the plan specifically from the police department to try to curb this back so it's not a third night?
Yeah, when you talk about being held hostage, that's literally what happened on Highway 277 around the city. Protesters were out on that highway, and people were terrified in their cars. The chief of police said, lock your doors, help is on the way. So that's really not too encouraging. I think if you had to summarize from an amateur point of view the police response last night, it was completely botched. They didn't have enough officers on the street. protesters time and time again gained the upper hand. It took 4 hours to clear this 4 blocks where I'm standing right now. They said it's not going to happen again tonight with the National Guard, with the governor, with a state of emergency. We're going to have to wait and see. It got ugly after dark the last 2 nights. It seems normal right now. That could change quickly.
Okay, Dana.
Steve, I wanted to follow up on that. I'm just curious what you're hearing about the cooperation between city officials and the state, so between the mayor and the governor. We know that was certainly a concern in other locations where there have been protests before, and there's that struggle sometimes between those two because a mayor doesn't want the governor to step in, but the governor feels like he or she has a responsibility to do so.
I think the final result that there was a failure is clear. The governor has said he's offered additional assets. It seemed like the mayor was reluctant initially to take those assets, threw the blame on her security advisors initially, but just from an amateur point of view, it seems like you'd err on the side of caution. You'd err on the side of having too many forces and then try and ramp down. That's not what happened. And by allowing the demonstrators to take control of the street for 4 hours, it gave them confidence and time to regroup, increase their numbers. So it put the police who were out here all night in a very tough position. There weren't a lot of them. They couldn't make arrests. They were getting beer bottles thrown at their heads, 3 of them hospitalized. So a tough position for the police on the street last night. Not enough numbers, it was clear, and that's been admitted by the chief.
Yeah, and the governor, by the way, said he's going to put 700 more law enforcement through the National Guard on the street tonight. Juan has a question.
So, Steve, one of the intriguing aspects of this case to me is what happened on Facebook, where you have a woman who claims to be Keith Scott's daughter. I don't know if she is his daughter, but she's on Facebook saying, you know what, they killed my daddy. My daddy's dead. And she's shouting and using profanity, and she says also, let me tell you that he was holding a book. Now, the police chief says, no book, a gun. That's a very distinct narrative, but the idea that he was holding a book reminds me of Hands Up, or it reminds me of people, I can't breathe. And I think it might have contributed to local protest. I don't think there's time enough for anybody from out of state to get there.
You're right. The fact that people are able and aggressively posting on Facebook without any verification, and it gets 1 million hits, it's almost too late after the fact. That initial impression is so strong. If it gets 1 million people to watch it, her narrative is out there, whether it's true or not. And that's been really one of the biggest differences since Ferguson, is protesters, community activists taking control over social media, speaking directly to people without any real editorial guidance, any censorship, or sometimes any respect for the facts of the case.
All right, Steve, we're gonna come back to you a little bit later in the show. Thank you very much. We're going to talk about this a little bit, continue for a few more minutes. But then let me ask you, there's this whole debate over when to bring in additional manpower. If you do it too soon or too aggressively, it makes people agitated, makes protesters more agitated. If you wait too long, businesses can get destroyed, people can get hurt.
And I was trying, and just spontaneously was thinking about that when I came up with the question. I'm trying to remember which protest it was where recently there was a similar situation where they should have called in more at the time, and they were unprepared, and even though they had warning that there was going to be protesters. So it is just an interesting dynamic between local officials and state officials, and even sometimes federal officials. Should there be additional resources required? And I know that mayors like to say that they can handle it on their own, but I don't think there's any shame in asking the state for cooperation and additional assistance. I don't think that is a mar on anybody's record.
Well, the mayor this morning, Jennifer Roberts, was on. She had a press conference with the police chief and the community relations director, and she said she had consulted with her city officials about what their needs were and what they expected, and come to the conclusion they didn't need the additional forces.
Right.
But I do think that we are missing the point if we're focused on how many forces or the like. I mean, this is something that is sweeping the country. This is the #1 political issue right now in Black America for sure.
Right.
And I think it's coming to the forefront of our national politics. And it's causing alarm because I think people realize there's something much bigger here that's been ignored by people who want accountability for the way that poor people, mostly blacks and Latinos, but poor people of all stripes are treated by police, use of excessive force.
But Juan, are you talking about the protests or are you talking about the rioting?
I'm talking about legitimate grievance, Greg.
Okay, but What we are looking at is not legitimate grievance. How is a shooting by a black police officer of a black man a race riot? Because they're changing the story. The media is allowing the story to change. This is not about grievance. This is about opportunity to riot. That's all it is.
I don't think so. I think that you have people now nationally, and I think this is, in other words, I think they're picking up on what happened in Tulsa. You mentioned Tulsa. Right. I think they're picking up on that in a big way, and I think you see it Ferguson, Baltimore, Chicago. I mean, you go on and on. At some point, you got to say, hey, there's something big going on here, and we're missing it.
I don't think you're wrong, but you also have to understand there has to be respect for the rule of law. They're not making it better by committing more crimes or acts of violence. What about the police officers? What about the police officer, the African-American officer that devoted his life, and it's a family of law enforcement tradition of serving, that was in this horrible situation, that saw a gun that was recovered at the scene? Does he have a right to live?
Sure.
Does he have a right to defend himself?
Of course.
As well?
But I think the question is one of accountability, obviously. Kimberly. Are police officers actually held accountable, or is it the case that people like us, America's middle class, we say, you know what, thank God for the thin blue line. Keep those people over there. And if the officer is at fault, you know what, we're always going to give the officer the benefit of the doubt because we think police are pretty much good people.
I don't give the police the benefit of the doubt. I was on the officer-involved shooting team for the San Francisco DA's office, and prosecuted officers
is charged already. I mean, I
that's in Tulsa. That's in Tulsa,
right? In Tulsa. But a couple of quick numbers for you. Last year, 2015, there were 990 people killed by police. 494 were white, 258 were black. Yeah. This year so far, 324 white, 173 black.
Right, so
double the number of white people are killed by police.
This is total distortion. Come on.
Well, that's
24%. I think the number.
Numbers.
No, I'm telling you something. 24% of the people being fatally shot by cops are black.
Yeah.
And if you compare the numbers in terms of black men, I've told you this before. 6% of Americans are black men. But about 40% of the people shot. So
the black population is about 13 or 14%.
Yeah, versus the 24%.
And
that's
the 24
double.
Number is higher than the black population.
That's what I'm saying.
But the crimes being committed by that population, it mirrors the number of crimes being committed by the white population. Numerically, it's people are being killed. White people are being killed at a higher rate numerically, just straight statistics.
Not
than
statistically.
Black people. If you consider the number of crimes committed by blacks versus whites, they are.
But the other thing, there was a black female that was shot 8 times over the weekend in Philadelphia. We didn't mention her about race because she was a cop. Nobody even, nobody talked about the Philly ambush. There were no protests about a black female officer being shot 8 times. There were no riots. There was no activism. There was no Sharpton.
So this is more.
Yeah, where was Black Lives Matter for that?
This is more cop, not race, right? We have a lot more to talk about this because I think the brother of Mr. Scott, of Keith Scott, said some pretty provocative things. We'll talk a little bit about more about that coming up. Much more in this hour on the race riots in Charlotte. Ahead, race agitator Al Sharpton actually isn't making this only a black and white issue. What he's accusing black officers of next.
So as riots infect Charlotte, rumor replaces fact, and the story becomes one of social injustice meant to indulge criminal behavior. As the media captures the gore, we stay home and we watch. Does such violence persuade us? Yes, it does, to buy more guns, and then wonder if we're doomed. Meanwhile, there's Al Sharpton.
The feeling is that many black officers know that they can get away with doing in the black community to black suspects what they would never do in another community. What you have not seen is a lot of black cops or white cops do this to white suspects. So even though there may not be the same embedded prejudice, there may be an embedded that I can be more reckless here or not as cautious here, because why don't we see this with black cops in other areas?
So if I'm not mistaken, did Al just accuse blacks of being racist against blacks, and that a black cop serving his community should not have defended himself simply because he's black? Would Al prefer only whites to police blacks? Isn't that precisely the opposite of a solution? Just 2 months ago, 5 officers in Dallas were assassinated. We reacted in horror. We hailed law enforcement. But life's now an Etch-a-Sketch. Current events shake up the past, and we're back to this. Those who wish to see America end know the trick. Racial politics. The more you separate, the less you empathize. Communication dies among unbending minds. And as for all of you pseudo-intellectual social justice warriors, save your stupid reasons for rioting. People riot because it's a riot, meaning it's fun. It's not about injustice, it's about euphoric violence. And we enable it by redefining such mayhem as protest. Does such violence advance any cause? Of course not, but you do get to deck a stranger. So ISIS, why bother? We're destroying ourselves without you. The big lie, I really believe this, I'll go to you, Juan, is that this is, you said it's out of anger. When I watch footage, I see a lot of people laughing, having fun, fighting over cash registers, not wearing shirts. That's the thing, apparently. I don't know. It's a party.
Well, no, I don't know if it's a party, but I do know that the one common thread in this abhorrent behavior is young people, oftentimes teenage males. And
right.
By the way, in Charlotte, just watching on Fox, you can see there are people of different colors. There are white people, black. You see a lot of people. So they're out there because I think
so
it's
rioting is a unity exercise.
I don't know what it is, but it's to me it's destructive. I think it doesn't persuade anybody. It doesn't build alliances. It doesn't allow for bridges of understanding to come to that would bring people together.
True.
I just think it's stupidity. But I will say I disagree with you about what Al Sharpton had to say, because I think you've pointed out to me repeatedly that black and Hispanic cops are much more likely, I think you said, to shoot.
It's a study.
Okay, that's what you told me.
Yeah.
So I just would point that out to you and say that the question of accountability for cops is very real in my mind. I mean, growing up as a black person in America, you do wonder, gee, why do the trash get picked up in some communities? Why are there good schools in some communities? And why do the police treat some communities as if they're protecting the community and other communities they treat as a group of suspects?
And so we move from calling police racist to the whole system is now racist. So we can't, you can't win.
Look, the brother of Keith Scott is grieving, no doubt, and he's angry and he's mad, but his comment was, quote, all white cops are...
All right, Kimberly. The most obvious fact out of this is rioting doesn't persuade anybody to your idea, so you know you're not really persuading anyone. And in fact, you're driving people to arm themselves. Right. You're going to see gun sales go up. You're going to see people that own businesses learning to protect their businesses. So it doesn't... The belief that you're trying to achieve something is pure BS.
Well, and the evidence is in the video. When you show these, quote, riots live, you see what's happening there. People like running around, having a good time, putting on some costumes, some face masks, etc. Total disregard for other human life. Total disregard for property. I think of the small businesses, people that have fought for their families to be able to provide, trying to be part of the solution in a community. Their property totally destroyed. Why is that okay? And now what you see, this is like the cause du jour. Like everybody wants to go out and riot. It's become kind of a social occasion, which is totally insane to me as a former prosecutor, having real appreciation for the cost emotionally and financially of violence. And now it's like the new rave party.
Yeah.
It's just, it's too much.
Dana, is it... there has to be a sense among a lot of people that it's not getting better, that society in general is going to hell in a handbasket when you see this. Is that as we realize that crime is going down around the world, or around the United States, but you have these spikes of violence, the perception is one of doom. I mean, I'm depressed by this stuff.
Well, I think, yes.
I'm already depressed.
You're depressed.
It's not helping.
But I also think that those that are participating in the riot or the protest, they feel that way too. That's what I'm getting the sense of, that they have...
The rioters?
Yes. Or the people that...
protesters.
The rioters, protesters, right? Who would repeat maybe something that Juan had said, which is, I feel harassed every time I get pulled over by the cops. I feel like I'm pulled over more. It's the perception, it probably is their reality, and they think nobody is going to do anything anyway. They feel like things are doomed, and they only get attention when this happens.
Yeah, I just would separate it.
I think that's what they think.
I would just separate. It's like this Skittles metaphor.
Oh, no, here we go.
I know. But, you have to separate. There are protesters. I don't think rioters and looters actually give a damn about anything. But there are protesters who do. Does that make sense?
I think they do.
Yeah. All right.
You wouldn't see MLK doing this, right? When you think about this in terms of effective discourse and having an open communication and discussion, this is not what it looks like.
Yeah. All right. The anger we've been witnessing on the streets of Charlotte isn't just about police shootings, but also about larger issues in African American communities. We'll discuss that next.
I serve a purpose, sir. I serve a purpose. My father serves a purpose. My brother serves a purpose. I'm here because guess what? Whether I'm here, I'm in school, I'm in my car. You said, okay, a man got shot over here, right? So you basically saying, why would I put myself in dangerous way?
Exactly.
Right. Oh, but guess what? I could be at work, at school, in my car. I can still get shot by the police. I can get shot anywhere.
Pain and anger has been filling the streets of Charlotte, as you could clearly see there. Newt Gingrich weighed in on the latest rioting and the state of race relations in America last night.
I think this is an American tragedy. 53 years after Martin Luther King's great I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial, 8 years after the election of an African-American president who's had 2 consecutive African-American attorney generals, race relations are decaying in this country. It's schools that don't work, neighborhoods with no jobs, random violence, a sense of being powerless even though there's an African-American president.
Dana, do you think that's an accurate reflection?
I think so. You know, the young woman that we showed, that was real anguish. And I don't think she was faking it. And she's obviously very passionate, maybe a little spun up in the moment, but I think she was representing some real hurt in the community. I don't know what it's like to be in that position. So I would like to listen to more people that are doing a good job of community relations. I think the education thing is absolutely true, but I also believe that the decaying of the social fabric of our country is not just happening in African American communities. It is happening across America, and especially as civic organizations decrease, especially in rural areas around the country. We are facing a big technological shift that is going to come with massive unemployment if we don't try to figure out a way to retrain. Faith is down, marriage is down. I mean, there's some big problems all across the country. I feel for that young woman, and I hope that there's a way to ease her anguish.
What is the way and the path, Eric? For somebody like that is very upset and feels let down by the community, by the country, where do you go? Where do you take her to make her feel like things are going okay?
That's why Charlotte is such an interesting study right now. If you compare Charlotte to Baltimore and Chicago, where there have been riots and crime, Charlotte has higher levels of household income. They have lower levels of poverty. They have lower levels of unemployment. African Americans are doing better in Charlotte than they are in some of the other major cities that have seen this type of crime. But there is one thing in common, and this may be the actual root cause to help solve some of this problem. In Charlotte, the police department is in Charlotte, it's 35% black in the city, but the police department is only 18%. So they're half represented by, it's less than 50% representation of African Americans on the police department. And maybe that, and Greg has pointed this out in the past, maybe that's what they need. African Americans need to have a bigger presence on police departments in major cities, urban areas.
And again, you referenced though the officer involved in the shooting, African American, with family of distinguished service. Juan, what do you do for her?
For her? Well, I think the first thing to do is what Dana Perino just did, which is to say, I hear you. I mean, not to dismiss her, I mean, it's easy to use her anger and the fact that she's shouting and using profanity against her and think, well, I don't have to listen to this person, but I think it's a very real cry of desperation that, I'm sitting in a car, or I'm standing here, or I don't know what you mean. It's like, Donald Trump said this thing about stop and frisk going nationwide. I mean, something that the judges have said is unconstitutional, that is known to
stop and frisk isn't unconstitutional.
Well, that's what a judge in New York said, and that's what, and it's something that has seeded so much distrust because people feel like, the cops aren't here to protect me; they're just here to harass me. And so, who are they representing? And to me, it reminds me of like the patriots of, the revolutionary period in our country who said, this British force in here, they got to go.
All right, Greg, so where do you go? Where does the race relations talk go on the walk?
Well, there's, I mean, I'm gloomy. But then I look back, I look at the big picture. We have 313 million people. Oh, we've seen dramatic reductions in crime and homicide over these decades with small spikes, or actually significant spikes this year. But our world has gotten, the United States has gotten immeasurably better, so that isolated incidents become more dramatic and demand more scrutiny because there are fewer of these. The fact is, there are fewer of these. Therefore, they get more attention in the 24-hour cycle. The other thing is, and we talked about this before, you know, when you talk about the fractured family and how community is breaking apart, what you lose from that is conflict resolution. It was just maybe a month or 2 months ago, Dwayne Wade's cousin, Nikki Aldridge, was killed. The reason why she was killed was because two thugs were trying to shoot a livery driver who looked at them funny. Yeah. So that's how conflict resolution is performed in communities, is I go find you and I shoot you. There's no more conflict resolution because there's no people teaching it.
So a little bit of a silver lining here. Greg points out the homicide rates are up and spiking in some of the major cities, but the incidences of cops shooting people, killing people, is exactly the same this year. It's on pace to hit almost the exact same number this year as last year. So you're seeing a lot more crime happening, but the incidence of people getting shot by cops is down.
And could that be linked in the sense that the cops are pulling back, right? Cops are pulling back, and you're seeing the rise in crime.
Could be.
What is it you call the Ferguson effect?
But crime is down, you know that.
No, but but in 25 of the top cities, there are spikes in homicides.
Yeah, spikes in homicides.
Right. And they're linking that to the Ferguson effect.
Okay.
Coolidge effect is something different.
You
can look that up.
Should I look it up?
Yes,
During the commercial break. All right. We turn to the presidential presidential race next. Hillary Clinton is now openly wondering why she doesn't have a bigger lead on Donald Trump in the polls. You're going to hear all about that next, and maybe something else next.
The election only 47 days away today, and Hillary Clinton only has a very slight lead on Donald Trump according to the latest average of polls, something that's dumbfounding the Democratic nominee. So here are some of her remarks to a gathering of union workers in Las Vegas.
Now, having said all this, why aren't I 50 points ahead, you might ask? Well, the choice for working families has never been clearer. I need your help to get Donald Trump's record out to everybody. Nobody should be fooled.
This is scary.
Wow. So she's saying that, especially to these union workers, gosh, Donald Trump doesn't pay his bills, he doesn't respond to contractors. But why are union people still backing Donald Trump? Eric,
wait a minute. Is that what you got from that?
Yeah,
that was the worst thing I've ever heard. It was not fingernails on a chalkboard. It was fingernails on a chalkboard in IMAX.
Right. Wait, that was the entirety of the speech.
In Dolby surround sound.
Trump political ad? No, I think he's doing well with union workers because he speaks, he talks. Yes, he has his own airplane, and yes, he has a penthouse over there. But he literally talks like the average Joe on the street. He talks like the guy you're having a beer with, and I think that resonates. And he also says a lot of things that I think union workers, yes, they want to see a minimum wage, and yes, they want to see unions more, I guess, aggressively backed. But he also, I think they're also very patriotic. I think they're also very concerned about national security, and I think Trump portrays that for the union workers. And don't forget, union workers are, their competition is migrant workers.
And then?
I think that they also want to get deals done. So everything in Washington has been stalled for so long. If you want an infrastructure bill who could actually maybe get that deal done, maybe it is Donald Trump that could get it done. But the other reason she's not 50 points ahead, and not just union workers, it's Gary Johnson. He is taking so many voters away from her and suppressing her numbers, and that definitely helps Donald Trump.
I said that last time.
And so she says to the union crowd, you need to have an intervention with your union workers, anybody that's fooled by Donald Trump. What do you think?
Well, I think that probably terrified them because that was, I mean, something is not quite right. You know, Greg's laughing because he doesn't want to say, but it's not quite right what was going on there. Something's not working well. I don't know, because that was not helpful. That sounded like she's just whining, complaining because she thought she was going to have it in the bag. And also, it's just highlighting a very bad negative for her. It's like, despite all of this, yes, you aren't leading him by 50. you must not be a good candidate. In fact, you may be the worst ever. In fact, Barack Obama got up and was hysterical, poor thing, because he's like, she's going to blow it.
Yes.
8 years of awesomeness, right? That's what
It's
he's
going down the
thinking.
tubes.
She's destroying it. He's like, my legacy, canceled.
You know,
right?
It reminds me of,
Canceled.
like, I've said it before, but she reminded me of somebody in line, like at the budget rent-a-car, who's in front of you, who's arguing with the person at the counter and is looking for you to back him up.
Yeah.
And she starts going, can you believe this? I wanted the Sebring convertible.
And you're like looking on your phone, Greg, as you look down. Yeah.
Well, we're going to get you. We're going to get you the Sebring next time, Gregory. Will law enforcement be able to keep the peace in Charlotte tonight? We take you back there live next.
Welcome back. And not too long from now, nightfall will descend on Charlotte, North Carolina. For 2 straight nights, we've witnessed the disturbing images of violent unrest, and hopefully the National Guard can help keep any protests in order tonight. Let's go back now to Steve Harrigan, who's done some terrific reporting from the ground there. Steve, I wanted to start off by asking, last night, downtown area businesses said to employees, don't come in. Have they given any guidance for tomorrow?
A concerning thing right now is hotels along the center of town here are actually telling their guests to leave, giving them cars and taking them to other hotels outside of town. This despite the promise of a state of emergency and increased police forces. So some real anxiety here among businesses. This NBA store is replacing its windows. It was one of the many businesses along this main strip that was looted last night. They've been really quick about getting the glass back in, getting them boarded up again, but concern now in several hotels, the guests really being told it's not going to be safe for you tonight on this main strip in Charlotte. You're going to have to go somewhere else.
All right, Greg Gutfeld.
Very dumb question. Do stores have looters insurance?
Theft.
Theft?
I
Yeah,
don't
guess
know
that's,
about that,
yeah,
but one thing you said earlier, I've been listening to you intently, and that is the people who had their shirts off were partying. I think a lot of those people who had their shirts off were because of the gas, the tear gas. They were using them as masks.
Well, how do you deal with tear gas? Because you're out there reporting.
You learn a lot about tear gas, which I realized once again is very debilitating. It hits your throat and your eyes and just makes you seize up. I couldn't believe how often the protesters were going back into it. Even one guy in a wheelchair was in it. These guys were prepared with shirts, with masks. Someone was even using milk of magnesia spray into their mouth and eyes. It's important not to rub your eyes, and it's important not to wear contact lenses if you're going to be tear gassed.
All right, Kimberly. Or false lashes.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the officer that was involved in this shooting?
African-American officer, 2 years on the force, studied criminal justice. There were 3 other officers present, but a real dispute and a debate about whether a gun was present in the victim's hand or whether he was holding a book. 2 very different narratives. And that video still has not been released 2 days in.
Okay, and he's on leave, is that correct?
Paid administrative leave, as is their policy in a shooting like this while the investigation is underway.
Juan Williams?
Steve, by the way, I was just fascinated by what you were just saying. It sounds like these people came prepared.
Prepared and ready to attack. I think the focus was not on looting. When some stores like this behind me were looted last night, you had a lot of protesters shouting at the looters. So there's really different groups involved with very different goals, but the hardcore, aggressive, young, angry people were not dissuaded by tear gas, by mace, by rubber bullets. They kept coming back for more.
And so these are young people by what you see on the street. These are they mostly teenagers? Are they college students? And also, Steve, these are people who are coming to the downtown area, which is why, you know, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, the other big companies headquartered in Charlotte are telling people to stay out. But they're not doing it in their neighborhoods, and typically riots have taken place in poor neighborhoods, not this one.
You're right, and that's a key difference in strategy here in Charlotte from what we saw in Ferguson, where it was basically black-owned businesses in black neighborhoods that were set on fire. Here the target is a very affluent area. We saw people smashing the windows of the Ritz-Carlton last night, jumping on a Mercedes SUV and smashing that. So they're picking their targets a lot more carefully here than they did in Ferguson.
Eric Bolling?
So, Steve, I noticed, and I'm not sure if this is unique to this situation, this event, this riot. Last night, you had that altercation with a couple of people. Looked like it started to get heated up. A CNN reporter got literally pummeled, thrown to the ground, pushed down to the ground aggressively, and also a photojournalist I believe, was threatened to be thrown into a fire. What is it? The simple question: why are journalists being targeted? Are you being targeted?
I think there's a real mistrust of the journalists, a real skepticism, and a real emotional anger here. You're dealing with people who are furious at times and emotional. So you really have to be careful. There's a lot of ways to get hurt. One of the main ways, I think, is when people start to stampede and run. You have to look around to look for a place to go. But another reason is when you have a camera with a light on, you are a target. And people were hit last night. They'll probably be hit again tonight. There's a real hatred, not just of the police, but of the mainstream media, who these people feel, I think, are not really being fair in listening to them, as Dana said earlier.
All right. Thank you, Steve. You do an amazing job out there, so we appreciate it. Stay safe tonight.
Thanks
One more thing from us is up next.
Okay.
Time for one more thing, but first a programming note. Tune in for a special live edition of The Five this Saturday as we pregame the first debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump Monday. Enforcement claims about what took place, and their answer was, quote unquote, quote, no comment, unquote. So we leave it right there. All right. So my good friends at IJ Review, some awesome journalists, have a new website that they launched just today, and it's called Maybe. Check it out.
Here comes Oswald down the hall again.
I emphatically deny these charges.
Donald Trump had a secret conversation.
But you can't open a can of pickles that way.
Conspiracy theories.
Is Donald Trump a Democratic plant?
Maybe.
So Maybe is a video series from these guys that investigates, I don't know, conspiracy theories,
right up your
thoughtful
alley.
theories. That's right. That's what I said. When they said, I said, yeah, this is something I love.
They sent it to you.
They did. They sent it. By the way, episode 1, get this. Is someone covering up Hillary Clinton's health problems?
Oh.
Did
Very thoughtful.
they interview you?
No, not at all. Not at all. Greg, you're up. Greg.
I don't think she's covering them up anymore.
That's true.
Oh my God.
Greg's Happily Ever After. This is great news. Do you remember before Labor Day, we had a bunch of dogs on the set from the New York, whatever you call it, Humane Society of New York. Well, Angelina, this is the Beagle, found a family. Harold Ambler, who's an excellent writer, adopted the dog. There's his children with the dog Angelina. Blah blah blah. Almost losing my mind there. By the way, you should buy Harold Ambler's book, Don't Sell Your Coat, which is about climate change. Very good book. But anyway, congratulations to the Amblers for their new pet.
And what about the rest of our dogs? We'll do a follow-up.
Newfound dog lover at the table.
Yes.
That's awesome.
You wanted
You're next, brother.
As long
Purely
as it's not
platonic,
called
though.
Jasper, he likes it.
Jasper's going to be a movie star.
Dana's up.
Okay, so two quick things. One is I was had a panel discussion today that Leslie Stahl hosted she was filling in for Charlie Rose.
Was it wooden?
And it's going to be air on PBS tonight at 11.
Fancy.
It is not Sesame Street. I got a chance to be on there with Frank Bruni and James Fowles. It was a good discussion about the debate. But, of course, the most important thing is this cute little story about a Dalmatian puppy named Chico. And he got away from his owner, and he ended up going into a firehouse, believe it or not. And it was in Tampa, Florida. They took him all around. They finally posted it on Facebook, like, anybody missing a dog? Because he didn't have a little chip thing. Always get your dogs chipped. And after 35,000 views on the Facebook post, Chico was reunited with his owner.
I mean, how funny is that?
I mean, what a
the odds?
coincidence,
A
right?
Dalmatian at the fire department.
It's almost like it was meant to be.
I would wander into there, too. I do.
And you're up.
They are the best cooks. Okay, so this is an interesting poll for you football lovers. Dana at the table. So according to a poll conducted last week, 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick, Greg, has become the most disliked player in the NFL. I know this is shocking. Conducted by ePoll Marketing Research, 1,100 Americans were asked about this. Okay, more than 350 players, so they had some choices. He was, quote, disliked a lot, 29%. That's up from 6% in August of 2014 that didn't feel him.
Like Hillary.
So in the dislike category, I don't know if you guys will figure this out, Juan and Eric, but he finished ahead as most disliked of Buccaneers quarterback James Winston, 22%, Dolphins Oh, Jameis. Yeah, I can't see anymore. You're right, it's Jameis. And that's who he is. Dolphins defensive end. This is another one. Ndamukong Suh. Close enough. He's not very well liked. 21%. And Patriots quarterback. Oh, say it isn't so. Tom Brady.
Wow, that's strong opinions about.
And by the way, that matters because with endorsements.
Yeah.
That'll hurt him with endorsements.
Let's see.
All right, Juan, you're up.
All right, so we may not have gotten to flying cars from Back to the Future yet, but we have gotten something from that classic film. Marty McFly's lace-up sneakers from the second film, now a reality, folks. Nike's self-lacing sneakers go on sale at the end of November. They're called the Nike Mag and use a pressure sensor to automatically tighten the straps until they sense resistance. The shoes are rechargeable. They light up when the shoe is tightening the laces. Nike's calling them the Nike Mag.
Can't wait.
And while few have been released,